The Texas Longhorns survived in double overtime against Arizona State, and now the Horns get set for a Cotton Bowl matchup against the Ohio State University Buckeyes 1 week from today at the Cotton Bowl. And joining me to talk all things Texas football is my old pal, Joe Cook of Inside Texas and InsideTexas.com, formerly of the 1-0 podcast, which for my money was the best Texas Longhorn podcast of all time. Not that I'm biased or anything, but it's been way too long since Joe and I have gotten to chop it up. Good to see you, my man. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to be back on the airways with you. And yeah, that was some fun times. We named it for a certain reason. We were trying to reminisce on how long ago it was, and we were doing that at the old station back when we still had you had to have like the barrier to entry was high level equipment. And COVID happened, and now the barrier to entry for having some great sports talk is a lot lower for a lot of good reason too.
Yeah. Well, don't sell us short because you and I are actually
The
qualified to do
talk is
this.
still great. The talk is still great, and the sponsors are still great. I remember the text line. I may not remember the text line number, but it's just easier to get to the masses, as you can obviously tell.
Yeah. Well, you guys are crushing it with InsideTexas.com and the Inside Texas YouTube channel. I put links to both of those in the video description below. So go support Joe and the entire team at Inside Texas. Love Eric, love Justin, love Ian, love Scipio Tex, everybody who's over there doing fantastic work covering the University of Texas. And yeah, go check out their website, go subscribe over there, and check out the work that they're doing on YouTube as well. So, Joe, you were in Atlanta. You were in the building for the 39-31 double overtime victory at the Peach Bowl a couple of days ago. I mean, I thought I was going to have a heart attack from a few hundred miles away. What was that game, and more particular, that finish like in person?
Yeah, I was trying to talk with people who were there and people at home, and even we talked with our sources. Like and it makes sense. That's easily the most emotional, draining game that we got all season. Like you didn't get that emotional drain from the first Georgia game just because they were never in it. Give me a second to cough. There we go. You never got that emotional drain from the first Georgia game. The second one, yeah, the stakes were high, but you knew the season wasn't over if they lost that game. And you always want to win a championship, but you knew that they could maybe not live to fight another day, but fight another day. You knew with that game that if Texas lost, that season's done. And so the just emotional draining when it goes from up 17-3 to halftime to 17-5 to the offense sputtering and then just the last few drives to then you're at the depths at 4th and 8. And then you go lower, you find a lower point at 4th and 13. And I was just talking with you. I was thinking like, man, this is going to be it for this team. And, it's 13. And then, boom, Matthew Golden in the end zone and
Yeah.
Andrew Makuba on like the 3. So it was easily the most emotionally draining game. I thought it was also just a game indicative of Quinn Ewer's entire career. You have some great starts, an extremely great start. You get a middle that has ups and downs, mistakes, his and others, and him being asked to win the game. And there have been so many times where we've seen quarterbacks around college football be asked to win the game, get the ball. Granted, I usually say hero balls like 50 times, but when you're only playing 60 plays, like 35, 36, that's hero ball.
Yeah.
And he answered. And there have been times in his career where he just has not been able to answer. And when I wrote about this, I think of the first Washington game. He played really well, but he was asked to do everything and came up a little bit short. The second Washington game, he played really well, asked to do a lot to make up for some of the fumbles and stuff around him, came up short. This game, asked to win it and throws a perfect pass to Matthew Golden, a perfect pass to Gunnar Helm, a perfect pass to Matthew Golden again. Really, the only mistake he made was one that Steve Sarkisian kind of had him making in that deep pass. And other than that, Texas lives to fight another day and play his old team, mostly because of what Quinn Ewers was able to do.
Yeah, it was a legacy game for Quinn Ewers, right? When you're a quarterback, your legacy is defined by what you do in big games and in big moments. And in this big game, in this big moment, Quinn Ewers stepped up, right? 11 of 14 with 2 passing touchdowns and 0 turnovers in the final 5 minutes of regulation and the 2 overtime periods. And look, Quinn Ewers did his part to ensure that that game never got to overtime. Unfortunately, the idiot kicker went full idiot and missed a couple down the stretch. But I think Quinn Ewers deserves credit for putting Texas in a position to win that game twice at the end of the fourth quarter. And then obviously getting it done on 4th and 13, which, look, I think regardless of how this season ends, that should go down as one of the best plays in Texas football history. But obviously, Joe, if the Longhorns find 2 more wins over these next couple of weeks, that might be like a top 3 play in Texas Longhorn history. I don't know if anything will ever surpass VY's run for the Roses. Like that might be number 1 until our great grandkids kick the bucket. But this could be number 2 if Texas ends up winning a national championship on January 20th.
Yeah, it's one of those things where is it like that play that decides it or is on the way to deciding it? Or like is it like roll left, which is a fantastic play, one that's very memorable for especially who they beat, but may not have carried the exact same implications as a play like the one that Quinn made the other day.
Yeah.
And James Brown himself. Like let's kind of think about it that way. Like I think, and maybe part of this has to do with how closely the sport is covered, and that you can get highlights in an instant. Wasn't the exact same then, but James Brown is remembered for being like a great Texas quarterback, and he won conference titles, played really well. But did Texas do anything nationally of consequence? And I'm not saying that's all James Brown's thing, but like, what is going to keep it at that level, and then what maybe raises it to that level is what we're going to find out over these next couple games.
Yeah, it's a great question. And man, that game, I mean, there were 5 moments where I thought Texas was going to lose on Tuesday. Now, for the first 58 minutes of game time, I felt good. Like even when Arizona State tied the game with 5 minutes left, I was thinking the Longhorns are going to find a way. Like they'll figure it out and they'll get this thing done. But in the last 2 minutes of regulation and then in the 2 overtime periods, there were 5 moments where I'm like, this is done. The first one was when the official said, the previous play is under review for targeting. And I'm like, man, Arizona State had a 3rd and very long. And if Texas gifts them this first down, then it's just not meant to be. It's just not our day. Maybe Arizona State's got a little team of destiny on their side. And I thought, all right, that was it. Obviously, no targeting called, no controversy there at all. Moment number 2 was Bert Auburn's second missed field goal, the one that doinked off the left upright at the end of regulation. I'm like, all right, not our day. Like the football gods are not on our side right now. It ain't happening. Number 3 was Sam Levitt's 16-yard run on 3rd and 14 in overtime. Because I'm thinking like, man, Texas has already blocked a field goal and Arizona State's kickers suck. Like if this gets to a 4th and long, I don't know if ASU's making it. And look, Texas is going to find a way, maybe without Bert Auburn, but they'll find a way to score. But then Sam Levitt picks up that 3rd and long, and Arizona State ends up punching it into the end zone. I'm like, all right, that's ball game. And then number 4 was 4th and 8. And then number 5 was 4th and 13 after the Kelvin Banks penalty. So literally 5 moments in the game where I was feeling how you were feeling in Atlanta. It's like, season's over. Like, we got to, basketball's happening. I guess we got to start talking about basketball now. Baseball, hey, Schloss, hey, that's coming up here in the next month. We got to start turning our attention to that stuff. And then all of a sudden, I don't want to say all 5 of those things went Texas's way because, missed field goal doesn't go your way, but they overcome all of that and they find a way to get it done. And look, a double overtime win counts the same as a 50-point win. It's survive and advance, the old March Madness adage. And they did that, but needless to say, they've got to play a hell of a lot better in these final 2 games if they want to win a national championship.
We've grown up. You and I grew up in an era of college football where style points 100% mattered, where you would have to split hairs between 2 12-1 teams. Heck, there were times you had to split hairs between 13-0 teams. Just ask the junior senator from Alabama about 2003 Auburn, or 2003 Auburn, I think it was,
Hmm.
and or even maybe it was 2002 Auburn, 2003 USC, something like that. And so you needed style points, and even in the regular season, like you do need style points. Like you need wins. You can't be 9-3, but you don't want to be the 10-2 team that's left out. That doesn't matter anymore. And yeah, you want to know what scales up to the next game against the Final Four opponent, but it doesn't matter. Like you leave that game emotionally spent, emotionally drained, but also like oddly emotionally satisfied because you got out of it. I have like a middle ground take on the on targeting. Um, I don't know what Michael Taft's supposed to do. Like that looked like a football play because it was one. And Michael Taft puts his body on the line like anybody else. Maybe it falls within the rules of targeting. Maybe it really does. I didn't think there were any indicate. They talk about the indicators, and like, hey, at a certain point, like two forces are gonna collide, and maybe helmets hit. I'm glad they didn't call it, but like, if they had called it, it would have been just yet another example of maybe the proper application of a really terrible rule.
Yeah.
I've seen so many instances where like, yeah, he launched with his head and neck and he, made forcible contact and like, I guess he's gonna sit out the next half, but like, what are we doing here? It's football. I thought that's what that was gonna be. And they felt another way. And I mean it's split second. We're watching in milliseconds what happened in real time. So I am surprised that it was not called targeting. I kind of thought it was at the time. I was shocked when
Yeah.
they didn't call that. But like you mentioned, there's no guarantee that Arizona State kicker is going to do anything of note to win that game, or that maybe Makuba or Barron don't make a play. Then the other one was I could you tell on TV how the energy was basically split between the two schools.
In terms of like fan base noise.
Yeah, well, for some reason, not for some reason, Arizona State's fan base, and maybe this had to do with my vantage. Like I'm on the TV angle, I'm on the bottom right side.
Okay.
And so all the Arizona State people in their band are in my face, and then the Texas people are facing the other way. And so I'm thinking last year when I'm at the Sugar Bowl and all the Texas people are in my face and the Washington people are facing the other way. And sometimes noise isn't the best, but I just felt Arizona State was way more engaged, like that
Yeah.
fan base in that stadium was. And I feel like that, like I said, the Texas fans were drained by the here we go again. And when that doink happened, like you mentioned, the moment, like I'm like, that's just gonna snowball. But to Texas' great credit, they didn't let it snowball. They even gave up a touchdown, but they made the right plays when they needed to make sure that it didn't end up costing them the season.
Yeah, it was hard to tell exactly what the percentage split was in terms of the crowd, but the neutral parties who were there. Like I had a couple buddies who live in Atlanta who didn't go to Texas or didn't go to Arizona State who saw that tickets were $20 and they're like, "Oh shit, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to this game. Why not?" And you know how it works. It's the same thing with the NCAA basketball tournament. The
Yeah,
neutral fans pull for the underdog. So, like, as Arizona State got back into the game in the fourth quarter and in overtime, it sounded a hell of a lot louder when Arizona State did stuff than when Texas did stuff.
and
So,
there were Georgia fans there too. Like there are
yeah,
probably Georgia fans who are like, I'm gonna sit this, or maybe not go to New Orleans, and not because of whatever happened, just decision long before. Like I'll go to this one, locals, and yeah, they do the I'm going to root for the underdog thing. This team that I'm never going to cross paths with again,
right.
aside from a conference rival, and that's another NCAA tournament thing too. Like think of the old Big 12 days when like maybe Missouri and Kansas City would be put in like OKC. They're both Big 12 teams. They're in different regions, but like they're in the same location. And you got Missouri people rooting hard as heck against Kansas. Yeah, it's very very similar thing, and it made for a very very interesting environment. I hope we get to go back because that's the nicest stadium I think I've been
Oh,
to
see, I
ever.
I guess we have to hope we go back because that means we beat Ohio State and we're playing for a national title. But I'm like wondering if that building is cursed. I mean, the both games that
But they
Texas
won.
played there, I know they did, but it's like I don't know if my heart can take. I was in Atlanta for the SEC championship game, and that obviously sucked. But that game was intense for more than 60 minutes, and then you get double overtime. Like, are we going to get to 3 overtimes in a national title game? Or are we going to have to decide it by 2-point conversions? Like, I don't know if my heart can take another game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I'm with you; it was nice as hell, but they don't let Bevo there, which already gives me bad vibes. And then it's just, is every game we're going to play in that building going to come down to the very, very final play?
Come down to Bert Auburn's leg.
Oh, don't say that. Please don't say that.
Uh,
If that's what either of these next two games comes down to, then the confetti will be falling on somebody else and not this Texas team. So we'll see, man. How you feeling about Ohio State? I know you guys at IT will be all over this for the next 7 days. We'll be all over this here for the next 7 days. But, Tuesday, I don't know how much of the Rose Bowl you got to see in real time because, you were obviously in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl and that game started like right after it ended. I should say Wednesday, not Tuesday. Wednesday was a stressful day of watching football because Texas put us through the ringer. And then we're like, oh, the team that Texas is going to play is up 34-0 on the number one team in the country, the only team that hasn't lost a game all season. Like, we could be in some trouble here. Early thoughts on the matchup between Texas and Ohio State.
I'm glad that we have Jade Barron to try against Jeremiah Smith. I'm
Yeah.
glad we've got. Then elsewhere, it's like there's a reason this team went all in on this season, and that's a thing that's kind of new in this era. Like they are paying guys right now who could have been day one or day two draft picks in the 2024 draft to play Ohio State football, and they're playing like day one, day two draft picks still. And that's not to say Texas is not talented. We know they are, but like the way that those guys are playing against a good Tennessee team and a good, really, great Oregon team is just nothing short of impressive. It's going to take Steve Sarkisian beating Jim Knowles bad, and
Yeah.
sometimes that hadn't worked out. It's going to take Pete Kwiatkowski beating Chip and Kelly and Ryan Day, and they've got some weapons over there. You may hope that the past performances are not always indicative of what is it? Well, I can't remember the phrase, but
Yeah.
you can't be like, oh, Will Howard hadn't beaten Texas before. Like this is a completely different situation. He's playing well. Like it's going to be very, very tough. And honestly, like it may be a tougher matchup than what the two teams on the other side provide, just because of the level of talent playing right now at Ohio State and how they've performed against two playoff teams in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think most people are going to look at the Cotton Bowl as like the national championship, right? Like most people are picking Ohio State to win the whole thing right now. If Texas pulls off the upset against Ohio State, then I think everyone's going to assume that Texas is going to win it all, right? I mean, Texas was the Vegas favorite before January 1st, and that obviously has changed because Texas needed double overtime to beat Arizona State, and Ohio State looked as impressive as they have. I think, yeah, right now, not everyone, but most people are just saying Ohio State's going to win the whole thing. If the Longhorns find a way to knock them off, I think the tides will turn in Texas's favor. It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you're seeing a lot of overreactions from one day of football. This has been an inconsistent Ohio State team all season long. Remember, like the Michigan game was 3 weeks ago. There's a common opponent between Texas and Ohio State. Texas on the road beat that common opponent by 30, basically. And Ohio State lost at home to that common opponent 3 weeks ago. And everyone was like, man, Ohio State really messed up. You see how good Kyle McCord is at Syracuse right now? They really let that guy go for Will Howard. Like, that was 3 weeks ago. Now, Ohio State's been by far the most impressive looking team in the college football playoff. But this is not a case of a team that dominated everybody all season long and had one bad game. They had 2 losses in the regular year. They barely beat a 6-6 Nebraska team in the regular year. They were struggling against really inferior opponents for large portions of games in the regular season. This isn't to say their roster's not talented and they're not good enough to win it all. This is just like, all right, it was not Texas's best day, and it was Ohio State's best day. It just feels like everyone is assuming that the Longhorns have no chance in this game. I don't think the talent gap between these two teams or the coaching gap between these two teams or anything between these two teams is insurmountable by any stretch, Joe.
I think there's already, you can go back to Clemson. There is already a narrative about Clemson that they are just not the same as they used to be. And so Texas covering against Clemson is like, okay, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And then you get to this point of the narrative where it's like, oh, you struggled against Arizona State, like the number 4 seed. Like I forget what they were actually ranked, but like, this is the Big 12 team and you're the big bad SEC team. So that narrative didn't really rise up. It just went, and that's despite the rushing stuff. Meanwhile, you have Ohio State who's just going, and people have memories like goldfish right now, just to think that okay, they're just going to keep it rolling, and how much does momentum matter in a college football playoff where you are playing on almost a week long turnaround, and you're playing the most important games, but that's of course they're still it does count for something to be playing good football. And if you go to Inside Texas, Ian Boyd wrote something that the way you have to defend Ohio State is a pick your poison type thing. Because what are you going to do? Are you going to play coverage to Emeka Ibuka, Jeremiah Smith? Okay, well, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Howard in the run game against behind a really good, even if a little bit depleted offensive line, still a tough proposition. Yeah. For all Michigan's faults, Michigan is good up front defensively. And so if you can, what Michigan did, even without Will Johnson, was they said, like, look, we're going to dedicate a little bit of extra coverage to these guys to where you kind of have like 3.5 over 2, and we'll go ahead and play the rest of the 7.5 in the box. And they could do that because they got All-Americans and really good front 7 players. And that's kind of, who's able to replicate that. Oregon wasn't. And, obviously Tennessee wasn't. So we'll see if Texas, with relying on guys like Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins and that crew to do the job up front while they let Taft, Makuba, Barron, and Muhammad try to their hands with not as much help as they probably wish they had against 2 great receivers. That's going to be the push and pull. It's going to be a very vertical push and pull when it comes to Ohio State on offense versus Texas on defense.
Yeah, I almost feel like you have to have extra secondary players, right? Like Oregon got burned because not only were they giving up points, they were giving up big plays. I mean, Ohio State had a 3-play touchdown drive in the first half. They had a 2-play touchdown drive in the first half. They had a 1-play touchdown drive in the first half. Like just all of these explosive pass plays that will demoralize you and end a game in the first quarter. And that Rose Bowl was pretty much done by the end of the first quarter. So, look, it's tough because, like you said, Ohio State's got one of the best run games in all of college football, and we haven't even started talking about their defense, which is the best in college football. Like, yeah, it really is pick your poison. But I think what did Oregon in and really what did Tennessee is they just gave up too many big plays. So I'm not doing that. Like I am making the run game and I am making Will Howard move the ball down the field methodically. I'm making them be perfect for 7, 8, 9, 10 plays in a row. And maybe they're good enough to do that, right? Like maybe there's just so much talent on the offense that even if they're not picking up explosive pass plays at will, they're still able to put up a lot of points. But I cannot risk giving up because those are game-changing plays, Joe. Those 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns, those are game-changing plays. Those will take your crowd out of it. Those will just demoralize a team. So I'm erring on the side of forcing Ohio State to run, but like you said, it's not like you're going up against some Joe Schmoes at running back. No offense to your namesake. Maybe you're related to that guy. But that's my game plan if I'm PK, but we'll see what he actually tries to do.
I think you say this, I say this for every game. It's like limit explosives, limit turnovers. And so that's the key, or limit explosives and force turnovers. Because if you're doing that, you're getting extra possessions. Yards are great, but points are what matter. But if you pick up 50 yards at a time, it becomes a lot easier to pick up points. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking that you rely on your consensus All American, your other All American. You rely on those guys to like, hey, you've been doing it all year. We're going to let you try again. And you rely on, Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins. Heck, this may be a good I don't know. I wonder if this is a Jelani McDonald game or a Jalen Gilbo game. Part of me thinks Gilbo just because of what the pass coverage responsibilities may be.
Hmm.
But you really just have to be able to not let their best be at their best and say, hey, you know what, Will Howard, if you can do this, you did it.
Yeah.
Tip your cap, and maybe even Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But like everybody's going to be watching 4. And what number is Ibuka? Is he 8 or
Two.
3? 2. Okay, everybody's
Yeah.
going to be watching 4 and 2. If those guys beat you, then that's because you did not do enough to stop the guys that everybody in the stadium knows is they're trying to get the ball to.
Yeah, it's scary to go up against them right now. It's a really good team, and I said it the other day. If Ohio State plays its A game, I don't know if there's anything Texas can do. Like, look, Texas has to play one of its best games, probably its best game of the season, and they're going to need Ohio State to just not be as sharp as they've looked in these 2 playoff games to this point. Because as great as Texas is, I mean, Ohio State, they spent a lot of money building this roster. I think top to bottom, they've got the best roster in college football. They've shown it so far in this CFB, and if they're firing on the cylinders that they've been firing on, then it could spell some trouble. Joshua says, "Yeah, the Texas D has to put pressure on Will Howard." Yeah. I mean, you have to, and it's tough because you don't want to bring extra blitzers because you need those guys on the back end, but you've got to find a way to disrupt Will Howard because he's good enough. Even though I think Quinn Ewers is the better quarterback in this matchup. Maybe that is my K-State, PTSD coming in here. But yeah, I mean, he's good enough to sit back there in the pocket and pick you apart with the weapons that he has. So you've got to find a way to get pressure with 4 or 5 and hope you can rattle Will Howard and turn him back into Will Spill the Pill Howard with a couple of turnovers next Friday.
One of the things Sark mentioned today, and that we saw Texas get beat on a little bit, is the quarterback, at least mobility game. I don't want to see run game because it's not like Sam Levitt beat Texas on a ton of designed runs, but he was really mobile. The third and long that you talked about, just extending plays. Excuse me. And so being able to, you know, send Colin Simmons, send Trey Moore after those guys. Anthony Hill, getting the first guy, getting him down, so you don't have guys having to run around on a fire drill on Ibuka and Smith. Like that's going to be really key. And I do wonder maybe if when they decide to deploy the quarterback run game, because
Yeah.
at a certain point, if you're Arizona State, your best chance to win is with Sam Levitt. And yeah, you may want to run him some, but you don't want to run him, get him hurt, and then be like, oh, we are only relying on Scattaboo. And then even as good as he was, as much leg drive as that guy has, like once the quarterback's out, it changes things. And maybe things are a little bit different with Ohio State because they got guys like Julian Sayin and Devin Brown who are of good quality as far as backups go.
Mm-hmm.
But so I wonder if this is the game when Ohio State really tries to let Will Howard be that fifth threat or fourth or fifth threat that teams just aren't used to dealing with.
Yeah.
And like just say, if he gets 50 rushing yards and a 20-yard scramble, then you weren't preparing for that. You were double covering Jeremiah Smith. You were trying to keep tabs on Igbuka, and you were loading up to stop the. Oh, boom! There goes 18. Like I wonder if this is the game where they try to do that, knowing that they maybe they think they don't have to get fancy
Yeah.
for whoever's on the other side.
It's such a complete offense, and like you said, they've got so many different ways to beat you. I mean, they've got 2 of maybe the top 10 running backs in the country, 2 of maybe the top 10 receivers in the country, and a really good quarterback who has found his rhythm as of late. What about the Ohio State defense? Like, Going into the playoff, Joe, I thought Texas had the best defense in the nation, and then Texas has put together its two worst defensive performances of the season in the playoff. I think you can kind of explain Arizona State by the fact that they were on the field for what felt like 95% of the game, but still, back-to-back, less than stellar performances for this Longhorn defense. Meanwhile, Ohio State, against better teams, has shut down Tennessee and shut down Oregon while that game was still kind of in hand. So, if you're Texas, how do you get the run game going? Like, how do you find a way to make the run game look the way it looked against Clemson instead of the way it looked against ASU?
I think you got to get fancy. You don't have to get tricky, but you got to get fancy. You got to make them defend every blade of grass. I know you like living on the outside runs and moving gaps that way, but I think you just have to start playing with eyes, playing with cues more than you ever have. The pass rush that Ohio State has is probably, I don't know if Texas will face a better one, especially now that Georgia's out of it, because guys like Jack Sawyer, I think Pickering, that's his name, right? I think he's still there. Like those are guys who, aside from Michigan, they've just wreaked havoc all season. So you don't want those guys to be in third and eights because, man, like Caleb Odom, or excuse me, Caleb Downs is just, you look at him and you're like, that is a football player you fall in love with. Like, from no matter what school you're from. Like, Devonta Smith was that way for me. I'm like, that dude's awesome. Like, I don't care what color he's wearing. Like, he's great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this may be sacrilege, but like CJ or CD Lamb,
Mm.
even for all the stuff he did, you're like, that dude is good at football. Penix, like, you just look at those guys, you're like, that guy's playing on, and Caleb Downs has the capability to do stuff like that. He's just an eraser in the back end, gets places really quick. He's athletic enough to where they thought, like, maybe we get the ball in his hands on offense early in the season. Like, he's just like that level of football player. Um, so I don't like the idea of like passing against him on they know it's passing situations. So you just have to make sure that that run game is attacking every blade of grass and getting as creative as Steve Sarkisian possibly can against the defensive coordinator that knows how to give them some trouble.
Hey, maybe let's be a little less stubborn with the outside zone, huh? Like
Yeah,
when it works, it's awesome. It's awesome. Clemson game, A&M game, Kentucky game. Like, it's not like it hasn't worked all year. It's been really good at times for Texas, and it's obviously a staple in the Steve Sarkisian offense. But when it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like Sark has that adjustment that maybe he needs to have. Like, you're watching Notre Dame last night against Georgia. They're running straight up the middle. They're not pulling blockers. They're not, having guys block to the side, and they're also using a quarterback who can run. And it's like, well, every Texas fan who wanted to see that in either Georgia game, you got to kind of see what it can look like in the Sugar Bowl last night. So Sark's going to try the outside zone. If it works, great, stick to it. But you're right. You got to have something else in your bag in the run game. And even if it's just screens, like if none of the other runs work, just screens or something to get Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue the ball, because those guys are too important. They can be difference makers for your offense. You can't just say, like, no, we're going to do the same thing over and over again and hope it works, or just say, no, we're not going to use them at all, because against this defense, you cannot be one-dimensional. You've got to find a way to get something going on the ground. And, Joe, I fear for Quinn Ewers. I fear for Quinn Ewers because you and I know very well how quickly this fan base can turn on this quarterback. I mean, some guys have never even given him any credit ever. And like the fact that the backup quarterback's last name is Manning has completely ruined people's ability to evaluate the career that Quinn Ewers has had at the University of Texas. But obviously, if Texas loses, this is Quinn Ewers' last game. If Texas can't run the ball at all and Quinn Ewers has to throw it like 40 or 50 times, he's probably going to throw 2 or 3 picks, and it's not going to be the game that any of us want to see him end his career on. So I'm worried. Like, if Texas can't run the ball at all, this is going to be a tough day for Quinn Ewers, and it's going to be one of those games where this fickle fan base just loses its mind and starts dunking on Quinn Ewers, acting like he had a horrible career at Texas.
yeah. Like I mentioned, if the game has to go to him, you can get Arizona State where he won it, or you can get other situations.
Yeah.
So I think it's one you're right. You have to get creative a little bit more so with your run game, not be super stubborn on running outside zone over and over. You have to trust that Hayden Connor and Jake Majors and DJ Campbell and even Cole Hudson can do something. And maybe that's because Ohio State's not expecting it, because they haven't done it as often as you would expect them to do. So you got to hang on to the ball, and you have to be able to run the ball and provide that balance, because we've seen that Quinn Ewers can pass Texas into victories, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not a surefire thing that, it's tough for any college quarterback. And even ones with lofty, recruiting profiles and careers like him, it's not easy for any college quarterback to pass into games when the defense knows it's coming and has the talent that Ohio State does. So any sort of balance is going to help, as Oregon learned, because once that game got out of sorts, then it was just, somebody brought up a point, may have been Chip on the call today. He said, Oregon had allowed 0 sacks in the first game, and then had 8 in this one. And then
Mm-hmm.
Sark's like, well, that's kind of game script. If you're passing a lot, you're going to get sacked a lot more. But that just can't happen. Texas needs to find some balance.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last thing real quick before we wrap up. How you feeling 7 days out? Give me a score prediction for the Cotton Bowl.
Oh man, I'll say at this point, with reserving the right to change, I'll go 30-20 Ohio State.
Okay.
I think it's going to look like that. It's going to be painfully close, but not painful in that you lose in the last second. Just that you're not getting the job done against a team that, though ranked 8, is playing like a number 1 team.
Yeah, they look really, really good right now. All right, Joe, this was fun, brother. Hopefully, not the last time we chop it up, but appreciate you joining us today, man.
Absolutely, BK. Thank you.
All right, y'all go check out Joe. Follow him on Twitter at JosephCook89 and check out the great work he does at Inside Texas. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to his channel, as we just started this a couple of days ago, but already over 100 subs. So we're working on growing this thing. Appreciate you guys checking this out. For Joe Cook, I am BK Brad Kellner. We will see y'all soon. And remember, when you listen to the BK Show, you rule. Hook 'em.